If you'd told me a year ago that I'd end up spending a weekend snowed in with my ex's older brother, I probably would have laughed and said something sarcastic like, "What is this, a porno?" But it happened. And honestly, it messed me up in all the right ways. It started with a stupid plan. I needed to get away for a bit. Work had been draining, my apartment felt like a trap, and I hadn't had a proper vacation in years. So when Jordan texted the family group chat, yes, I'm still in it, don't ask, that their family's mountain cabin was sitting empty and anyone was welcome, I jumped at it. Jordan was my ex. We'd dated for a few months in college. It ended civil, mutual even, but we hadn't talked much since. Still, I figured it was a free cabin, and no one else seemed interested. The day I drove up, it was cold but clear. The road wound through pine forests, the kind that made you feel small in a good way. The cabin was everything I remembered. Cozy, kinda outdated, but charming in that wood-paneled, smells like firewood kind of way. I had barely unpacked when the door creaked open, and there he was. Evan, Jordan's older brother. I hadn't seen Evan since the breakup, and I definitely hadn't expected him to show up. He was wearing a beanie, a dusting of snow on his shoulders, and that signature smirk, like he knew something I didn't. "Oh," I said, dumbly. He raised an eyebrow. "Didn't know you were coming up." "Same," I muttered. Jordan said the place was empty. Evan shrugged and dropped his bag by the door. "Well, guess it's not. You mind sharing?" That was Evan. Always so casual, like nothing ever fazed him. He was a few years older, broader, with that easy confidence that made him magnetic, without trying. Back when Jordan and I were together, I used to catch myself watching Evan a little too long during family dinners. But I never let myself go there, obviously. Now, it was just the two of us, in a cabin. While a snowstorm crept over the mountains, we settled into an awkward routine. Evan claimed the bigger bedroom like it was a given. I didn't argue, mostly because I wasn't about to fight over bed space with a guy who looked like he could bench press a black bear. I took the smaller room, dropped my bag, and tried to shake the feeling that this was going to get weird fast. That night, we made pasta. Not together, more like next to each other. I chopped garlic while Evan stirred sauce in the pan, neither of us saying much beyond basic kitchen logistics. "You still doing graphic design?" he asked at one point, glancing over his shoulder. "Yeah," I said. "Freelance mostly. Pays the bills." He nodded. "Cool." That was it. Cool. We ate in the living room, the fireplace crackling, plates balanced on our knees. It wasn't until the wind picked up outside, whistling through the trees, that we both looked up at the same time. "Storm's hitting early," he said. "You think we'll get snowed in?" Evan shrugged. "If we do, we've got food, heat, and enough bourbon to last a week." I smiled. Comforting. Later, while he set up his laptop to watch some old war movie, I stretched out on the other couch, scrolling through my phone without really seeing anything. Eventually, I asked, "So, how's Jordan?" Evan paused. "He's fine. Still in Chicago, dating someone new." I nodded. Good for him. There was a silence after that. Not hostile, just full, like we were both thinking of things we weren't going to say. Evan spoke first. "He never told the family why you guys broke up." I looked over. He wasn't watching the screen anymore. "I guess we just stopped working," I said carefully. "Different cities, different speeds." "Jordan always moves fast," Evan said. "Doesn't sit still long." I hummed in agreement. "You always seemed more the slow burn type." That made him smirk. "Is that a compliment?" "I don't know," I said, eyes drifting back to the fire. "Is it?" He didn't answer. Instead, he stood up, crossed the room, and grabbed another blanket from the cabinet. Without a word, he tossed it at me. "You're shivering," he said, settling back on his couch. I caught the blanket, the heat from the fireplace suddenly not enough. It was around midnight when I finally went to bed, but I barely slept. The wind howled, the old wood creaked, and in the next room, Evan's steady breathing through the wall was the only thing that kept me from unraveling completely. The next morning, everything was white. I pulled the curtain aside and stared out at the snow piled up past the porch railing. It looked like the entire mountain had disappeared into a frozen cloud. I checked my phone. No signal. The Wi-Fi, already spotty, was now completely dead. We were officially stuck. I made coffee, wrapping myself in a hoodie, trying to ignore the low ache in my back from the too soft mattress. Evan came out of his room shirtless, scratching at his chest, like this was just another Tuesday. He saw me staring and grinned. "Morning." Jesus, put his shirt on. "Why? Cold in here?" He walked past me to the kitchen, muscles moving under his skin like some kind of slow-motion advertisement for bad decisions. I looked away, pouring 2 cups of coffee without asking. "Thanks," he said, taking one. "You always make coffee like it's a science experiment?" "Precision matters," I muttered, trying not to sound offensive. We sat at the little table by the window, steam rising between us. Outside, snow was still falling, fat flakes swirling like they had nowhere better to be. Inside, it was quiet. Too quiet. "I thought it'd be weird being here with you," Evan said suddenly, not looking up from his cup. "Oh," I said, startled. "I don't know. Jordan used to talk about you a lot, even after you broke up." I swallowed, unsure what to do with that. "What did he say?" Evan shrugged. "That you were smart, quiet, maybe too thoughtful for your own good. He said you needed someone steady." I laughed softly. Guess he didn't think that was him. He knew it wasn't. Our eyes met then, and something heavy settled between us. A long, loaded silence. "I don't regret dating him," I said, voice low, "but I do regret how it ended. I felt like I left a mess behind." "You didn't," Evan said. "Jordan moved on, and for what it's worth." He paused, then added, "I was always a little jealous." That made me blink. Of what? Of him. Of the time he had with you. I didn't know what to say. The air felt too thick, like the walls were closing in. "You're messing with me," I said finally, trying to play it off. Evan leaned back in his chair, that familiar smirk tugging at the edge of his mouth, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Maybe," he said, but something in his tone told me he wasn't. We didn't talk about it the rest of the day. Whatever that moment was over coffee, it slipped into the silence like everything else we weren't saying. We spent the afternoon doing the usual snowed-in things. Board games, hot chocolate, even tried building a fire after the heating started to flicker. Evan was surprisingly good at keeping busy without being annoying. It was intense. Not exactly. Just careful. That evening, the power finally went out. The whole cabin dimmed into a low, flickering orange glow from the emergency candles and the stubborn fireplace. I was sitting on the floor, leaning against the couch, legs stretched out in front of me, when Evan walked back into the room carrying 2 heavy blankets and a half-empty bottle of whiskey. "Heat's not coming back tonight," he said, dropping a blanket beside me. I pulled it over my lap, nodding. "You gonna freeze, or are you sharing that?" I asked, nodding at the bottle. He passed it to me without a word. We drank in silence for a bit, the fire popping, the wind howling outside. Somewhere in the middle of the second pour, Evan sat down beside me, his knee brushing mine. "You ever think about how weird this is?" he asked. "What? The snowstorm? Or the part where I'm stuck in a cabin with my ex's brother?" "Both," he said, grinning. "Mostly the second." I took another sip, feeling the warmth spread through my chest. "You were always off limits," I said. He looked at me, brow raised. "Off limits?" "Yeah. I mean, you were Jordan's brother. It would have been weird." "It's still weird." I nodded. "That's what makes it worse." He didn't respond right away. Instead, he leaned back, stretching his arms over the back of the couch behind us, his body sinking lower into the cushions. I could feel the heat coming off him. Or maybe it was the whiskey. "Ever wonder if things would have been different?" he asked quietly. "What do you mean?" "If you and I had met first." The room suddenly felt smaller. The sound of the wind, the fire, even my own breathing. Everything faded for a second. "Evan," I said, warning in my voice, but it came out too soft, too unsure. He didn't move closer, didn't touch me. But he didn't look away either. "I'm not trying to mess with your head," he said. I think I always liked you more than I should have." I stared at him, at his expression, earnest, almost nervous. "Did Jordan know?" Evan shook his head. "Hell number. I wouldn't have said anything back then. But now, I don't know. Now you're here. I'm here. And it doesn't feel like a coincidence." I should have told him to stop. I should have made a joke, deflected, walked away. But I didn't. Instead, I said, "Yeah, it doesn't. We didn't touch. Not that night, not really. But something shifted." After that conversation, Evan didn't push. He handed me the whiskey, we watched the fire die down, and when it was too late to pretend either of us wasn't shivering, he simply said, "You take the couch. I'll take the floor." But neither of us moved for a while. The fire burned down to embers, and eventually I curled up under the blanket, listening to him rustle a sleeping bag just a few feet away. The quiet between us wasn't awkward anymore. It was loaded, sure, but softer, like a question we hadn't answered yet. In the morning, the snow had stopped, but the roads were still buried. I made instant oatmeal and handed him a mug of coffee. He nodded, "Thanks," but there was something new in his eyes now, like we were both holding on to a secret that hadn't even happened yet. The day passed slow. We dug out the porch together, tried to sweep off the car just to feel like we had a plan. We didn't. The car wasn't going anywhere. By late afternoon, the power came flickering back, weak but functional. Evan tried the TV. No signal. I joked that it was like being trapped in a romantic comedy minus the actual romance. He laughed, but not the loud, careless kind of laugh. This one was quieter, thoughtful. "What's the part after the snow melts?" he asked. "In those movies?" I looked up from where I was folding one of the blankets. "What do you mean?" "I mean after the weekend ends. After everything feels real in here, but doesn't make sense outside of it." I didn't answer right away, because, yeah, I'd been thinking about that too. The cabin was a bubble, but bubbles burst. "We go home," I said finally, "and probably pretend none of this happened." Evan nodded slowly. "Is that what you want?" I hesitated. "I don't know. I'm still figuring out what this even is." He stepped closer, just a little, just enough to make me aware of every inch between us. "I think you know," he said. "You're just scared of it." There it was. Not a challenge. Not even a flirt. Just truth. I swallowed hard. Jordan would kill me. "I'm not Jordan." His voice was calm, low. The words landed in my chest and stayed there, heavy and warm. "You said I was off limits," Evan added, softer now. "But maybe you weren't off limits to me." My mouth went dry. My heart was a mess, but I didn't move away. "I can't promise anything," I said quietly. He nodded. "I'm not asking you to." Then, finally, he touched me. Just a hand on my wrist. Nothing more. But it was enough. We didn't kiss, not then. But the way Evan's fingers lingered on my wrist, the way his thumb grazed my skin like it had all the time in the world. It was more intimate than any kiss I'd had in months. My brain screamed all the reasons why this was a bad idea, but my body stayed still, anchored, awake. That night, we didn't separate. It wasn't even a conversation, just a quiet, mutual decision. When we turned off the lights, we both ended up back in the living room, drawn like magnets. He sat down next to me on the couch, and I leaned into him like it was the most natural thing I'd ever done. We stayed like that for a long time. His arm eventually slipped around me, and I let my head rest on his shoulder. It felt absurdly easy. "This isn't the whiskey, right?" I asked into the silence. "No," he said, voice near my temple. "This is all me." I felt his breath in my hair, the slow rise and fall of his chest. He didn't pull me closer, didn't try anything. Just sat there holding me like I was something delicate, like maybe he'd wanted this longer than I realized. Jordan always had the loudest stories, I murmured, not even sure why. Evan chuckled softly. Yeah, he needed a lot of space. And you? I liked the quiet. We stayed there until our bodies shifted naturally into lying down. The couch wasn't big enough for two full-grown guys, but we made it work. I was curled against him, half draped over his chest, legs tangled. I could feel his heartbeat. It was steady, comforting. Somewhere in the middle of the night, I woke up to find his hand resting low on my back, still, protective. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I had to be anywhere else. The morning after, it was brighter, warmer. The kind of post-storm clarity that makes the world look cleaner, like something's been reset. I found Evan in the kitchen, flipping pancakes like it was just another Sunday. He handed me a plate without a word. I didn't ask him what this meant. I didn't want to break the spell just yet. Roads are mostly clear, he said. We can probably head out this afternoon. I nodded, quietly finishing my breakfast. Neither of us mentioned the night before, but as I washed the dishes and handed them off, he didn't let go of the last plate right away. His fingers brushed mine. A question again. I'm not good at this, I admitted, at talking about feelings. He raised an eyebrow. No shit, I laughed. But I don't want that to be the last time I see you. He leaned in, just slightly. Then, don't let it be. It wasn't a declaration. It wasn't even a plan. But it was something. A thread, a signal, a maybe. And maybe that was enough. We packed in a kind of quiet rhythm, like neither of us wanted to break whatever had formed between us, but also knew we couldn't stay in the cabin bubble forever. The road out was slick but drivable, and by mid-afternoon we were back in town, the skyline slowly replacing the trees. Evan parked in front of my place and killed the engine. You need help carrying your stuff? He asked, not really looking at me. Nah, I got it. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was thick with the stuff we weren't sure how to name yet. I sat there, hand on the door handle, and took a breath. So, what now? He looked at me finally, eyes a little tired, a little hopeful. I don't know, he said. We both live in the same city. That's a start. And Jordan? Evan exhaled slowly. We're not kids anymore. He'll get over it. I nodded, but the weight of that truth still pressed against my ribs. I knew it would be complicated, but what we'd started in that cabin, it didn't feel like a fling. It felt like something I'd regret walking away from. Do you want to grab a drink next week? I asked. Like, a drink? Yeah, I said, cracking a smile. Like, where we pretend we've never met and you try to impress me with your pancake flipping skills. He laughed, and it eased something between us. I'd like that, he said. We didn't kiss goodbye. It wasn't the moment for that, but before I got out of the truck, Evan touched my wrist again, just like he had in the cabin. His thumb brushed my skin, and that small, simple contact said everything. That he was serious, that he wasn't afraid, that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning. The next few days felt weirdly normal. We texted. Nothing flirty or over the top. Just short updates. A meme. A photo of the snow melting off the cabin porch. A made pancakes, not as good without you, kind of message. Evan wasn't pretending we hadn't shared something. But he also wasn't pushing for more. I, on the other hand, was spiraling quietly. The night before our drink plans, I did the one thing I told myself I wouldn't do. I checked Jordan's Instagram. It was the digital equivalent of poking a bruise. There he was, smiling, shirtless in Cabo, arms around some guy with a finance guy haircut and perfect teeth. There were comments, all inside jokes and emojis, and one particular caption that said, "Didn't expect to meet someone like you." I stared at that one too long. It shouldn't have mattered. Jordan and I were over. But seeing him happy, flourishing, even while I was still decoding texts from his older brother, it made my stomach twist. The worst part? I couldn't even talk to anyone about it. What was I going to say? Hey, I think I'm falling for my ex's brother who held me in front of a fireplace and made me pancakes. That doesn't exactly land gently in conversation. The next evening, I stood in front of my mirror for way too long, trying on a third shirt that looked too much like the first two. I told myself this wasn't a date. It wasn't. But when I stepped into the bar and saw Evan at a corner booth, wearing that same relaxed grin, something in me loosened. "You clean up all right," he said, eyes scanning me in a way that didn't feel casual. "You're not so bad yourself," I replied, slipping into the seat across from him. We ordered drinks, talked about work, about the sudden return of rain instead of snow. Evan told a ridiculous story about a coworker dropping a cement mixer on a client's driveway, and I laughed harder than I had in days. But eventually, the conversation slowed. There was a beat, a pause between sips of beer. "Have you talked to him?" I asked. Evan's expression barely changed, but I saw it. The flicker. He knew who I meant. "Not yet," he said. I was waiting to see where this was going. I nodded slowly. "And now?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table, fingers laced. "I want to be real with you, but I also know this is loaded, complicated. If you need space or time." "I don't," I said, cutting him off gently. "I just don't want this to blow up in our faces." Evan reached across the table. Not some grand gesture, just a hand over mine. "Then let's be careful. But let's be honest too." I looked at our hands. My heart was doing that thing again, fluttering like it was trying to write its own script. "Okay," I said quietly, "let's see where it goes." It was supposed to be a quiet Sunday. I was making coffee, still in sweats, when my phone buzzed on the counter. I almost ignored it, figured it was a delivery update or one of those pointless group chats, but something made me check. "Jordan, can we talk?" I stared at the screen for a full 30 seconds, the weight of those 4 words settling like cold water down my spine. Evan and I hadn't hidden things, exactly, but we hadn't gone public either. We'd been careful. Dinner at his place, long walks, late-night calls that left me smiling in the dark. It was new, real, and it wasn't anyone's business until now. I didn't reply immediately. Instead, I paced my apartment like I was walking out nerves. He showed up 2 hours later, same Jordan, clean-cut, confident, slightly overdressed for a Sunday. He leaned against my doorframe, hands in his jacket pockets. "I'm not here to start drama," he said. "Okay. I just want to understand." We stood in my living room. Neither of us sat. "How long?" he asked. "Since the snowstorm," I said. "It wasn't planned. It just happened." Jordan's mouth tightened, but he nodded. "Did it happen while we were still?" "No," I said quickly. "We were long done. You know that." A beat of silence. "I always thought he had a thing for you," Jordan said finally, almost like he was talking to himself. I blinked. "You did?" He nodded. "I just never thought you'd go for it." That stung more than I expected. I didn't know what I was hoping for. Maybe understanding. Maybe some kind of weird retroactive blessing. Instead, I got the cold truth of it. To Jordan, this felt like betrayal. "Look, I'm not trying to rub it in your face," I said, "but I like him. It's real, and I'm not going to apologize for it." He looked down at the floor. "I don't need an apology. I don't know. Maybe I thought we'd always be the closest thing each other had." That part hit. Jordan and I were never perfect, but we had history. A rhythm. That doesn't just vanish. "I never wanted to hurt you," I said. He nodded once. then stepped back toward the door. "Take care of him," he said, quiet now. "He's a better guy than people realize." And then he was gone. That night, I met Evan at his place. I didn't even say anything, just walked in, wrapped my arms around him, and let myself breathe again. "He knows," I whispered. Evan's arms tightened around me. And he's not thrilled, but he's not going to stop us. He kissed the top of my head, slow and certain. "We're not doing anything wrong," he said. I nodded against his chest. "I know, but it still feels like a lot." "Worth it?" I looked up at him, heart already answering for me. "Yeah," I said, "worth it."